All right, tonight we're going to be in Matthew, the fourth chapter. And if you'll take a little peek at it, why, you will recognize that that's where we were last week. We made comments about it and so forth. In Matthew 4, down through the end of the chapter, talking about the various aspects of it. And tonight we're going to be looking at it just a little bit more because there is a good reason for doing that. The reason for doing that is this. We're going to put things in perspective, of which we have been in the past. But the calling of the disciples of Jesus is very, very important, and the Sermon on the Mount are very important. And I would like for us to see how they took place. Now, last week we were trying to go through and get through this section as fast as we could, and we made note. It sounds like Jesus was just walking along the Sea of Galilee, and he saw a couple of fishermen there, and he said, "Come, follow me." And they came and followed him. Went on down, there was another boat. "Come, follow me." They came and followed him. But it didn't happen in that way. It happened in a very normal way. It happened in a way, when we put it in the chronology of the way it happened, that you'll see that these men have seen him do many miracles. They're familiar with him. It's not that he's just walking along as a stranger and calls them to come. They're very familiar with what he's doing. Now, if you remember, last week we started out and we said, now we took the study of the life of Christ. He was baptized with John in the book of Matthew. Then he went up into the temptation in Matthew chapter 4 and ended in verse 11. But in verse 12, then he begins his Galilean ministry. In other words, you just go right straight through and you can read it there. But we pointed out that all of this other stuff took place between verses 11 and 12. And so we went over to the book of John and we studied about all of these things. And even while we were over there studying the book of John, we found out that he became acquainted with 4 of the disciples that he is eventually going to pick. So what we need to do is to put things in chronological order. Now, here's the problem when we do that. If we don't do it, then we read just in Matthew, and we come across here, and it sounds like that Jesus was baptized, he went off into temptation, he came back out, and then immediately he started preaching. He walked down by the lake, and he said, "Come and follow me." And those guys jumped out of the boat, followed him, without any acquaintance with him at all. And then it goes through, and he starts preaching in various places, and then he preaches the Sermon on the Mount, and then it goes on. Well, we kind of miss something if we don't put it in chronological order. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they tell about the events of Jesus, but you have to look and see what he did here and then what he did here, because one of them will leave out one story, another leave out another story. Intentionally, this is the way it is supposed to be. It's just like that if you go on vacation, you come back, and 3 people ask you tonight, "Well, what did you do on vacation?" You're not going to tell them exactly the same story, are you? Right? You might say, "Well, I went to New York, then I did something else." To somebody else, you might say, "Well, we drove to New York, and then we flew down to Atlanta." You've learned some new stuff. Somebody else, you might say, "Well, we went back to the East Coast, and we went down to Atlanta, and we were looking through the Civil War, and okay, now then we know a little bit more." That's the way it is with Christ, his life. So put it in chronological order. So you say, "Well, that's simple, Lowell. Why don't you do that?" Well, here's the problem if we do that. Then we're just jumping back and forth from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and now then here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and we're going to get all confused. At least I will. I don't know about you, because I've tried this, so you get all confused. So what I'm trying to do is do it this way. As we start out in the study of the life of Christ, I'm trying to put it in chronological order so we can see that he was baptized, he went into temptation, he went down to Jerusalem, first Passover, a lot of things happened there, he came back up, various things have happened, then he calls his disciples, and then later on he's going to preach a Sermon on the Mount and so forth. So we'll put it in context so that you kind of see what is happening. Then probably after tonight, we're going to kind of settle down in the book of Matthew, and we'll just take his account and just start studying then the stories in his account without putting them into the chronological mode there. They won't need to be at that point because it's really not that important. But tonight it really is. Now, what we're going to do tonight is we've already studied in Matthew chapter 4, verses 12 through 25, and we have down now to Matthew chapter 5. Now, in Matthew chapter 5, that's the Sermon on the Mount. Now, between the last verse of chapter 4 and the first verse of chapter 5, Jesus did some other things. See? He did some other things. And so we'll have to go now, especially to the book of Luke, and see some other things that Jesus did in this period of his life. And it'll help us understand a few things that he did in here. Now, we're going to turn over to Luke chapter 4 and verse 31, and we'll pick up our story there and give us some ideas here of what he was doing at this period of time. Now, it says, and he came down to Capernaum, the city of Galilee. Remember, that's where we are, up there at Capernaum at the on the sea, the city of Galilee. And he was teaching them on the Sabbath day, and they were astonished at his teaching, for his word was with authority. Now, here's what that means. And we'll see it again. The rabbis, the Jewish rabbis, would teach in a certain mode, in a certain method. And they would say, now here's the reason that you are to wash your hands. Now, there's nothing in the Bible about washing your hands before you eat. But they would say, you are to do this because Rabbi so-and-so, 500 years ago, said it's a good idea. And Rabbi so-and-so, living in this other country, concurs. And Rabbi so-and-so says this is what we should do. And Rabbi so-and-so, and so they would heap the rabbis up, and when you heap enough rabbis up, then that's supposed to make it legal. Now that's the way they would teach. So when these rabbis would come out, they wouldn't come out and teach as though they had the authority. But when Jesus came teaching as one who had authority. And he's going to be teaching, here's what I say unto you. Here's what you must do. Somebody say, well, Jesus, what rabbi said that? Doesn't make any difference about rabbis. See? I'm telling you, this is the way that it is supposed to be. So his method of teaching was totally opposite of the rabbis. So try to put yourself in that situation. You would notice it immediately. All your life you've been raised by teachers that's teaching you. They say, now here's what you should do. Then rabbi, 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 rabbi. And so they quote all these rabbis. And then in walks a guy and said, now you should not do that because I said so. It kind of boils down to that. I'm telling you the way it should be. So now he taught them with authority. We'll see later on when we get on the Sermon on the Mount on this. Then in verse 33, and in the synagogue there was a man that had the spirit of an unclean demon. And he cried out with a loud voice, Ah, what have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Nazarene? Art thou come to destroy us? I know thee, who thou art, and the Holy One of God. That's interesting. We got to stop. We got to talk about some demons now as we go through here. But I want you to note here, he goes into the synagogue, and here is this demon in this man. And so he cries out, and he said, what have you come here for? I know who you are. You're the Son of God in here. Now, keep this in mind. Who is the first, how will I use that word? You'll give me the word in a minute. Who is the first thing, the first personality, who is the first it that confessed Jesus was the Son of God? A demon. So you see why I say, I don't know, not a man. He used a man. He was living in a man. He used a man's tongue, but he's a demon. So a demon is the first thing on this earth that confessed Jesus as the Son of God. He had superhuman knowledge. He knew who he was. So he cries out with him. And this will not be the last time, the only time that happens. Jesus rebuked him and said, "Hold thy peace." In other words, keep quiet and come out of him. And when the demon had thrown him down in the midst and came out, having done him no harm, and amazement came upon all, and they spake together with one another, saying, "What is this word? For with authority and power he commandeth the unclean spirits, and they come out. And there went forth a rumor concerning him unto all the places of region round about." So here again we have that authority. He walks in. The demon cries out, "I know who you are. You're the Son of God." And in essence he says, "Shut up. Hold your peace. And come out of him." The demon came out. And people were just amazed. Who is this? Now keep this in mind. What did Jesus use to cast the demon out? What did he use? Words. That's all he worked. Who is this that's able to speak and have that power in his words to cast out demons? And of course, his reputation starts flowing throughout all of the land. We'll see how his reputation just keeps building in here. Let's take a quick peek at demons. I'm going to tell you all about demons, okay? When we get through, you say, "Lowell, what have you said?" And I'm going to say, "I don't know," because there's very little I know about demons. But here's some things I do know. And that is that in the Old Testament, they were called familiar spirits. They had demons and people, and they were called familiar spirits. That is, spirits that were familiar with this guy, a spirit that would enter into a human being, and so that's what they called them there. And Leviticus 19 commands the Jews to stay away from them, have nothing to do with them. Now, in the New Testament, they're spoken of as personalities. In James chapter 2, verse 19, Jesus is talking to some people who said, all you have to do is believe. And James says, why, even the demons believe and tremble. In other words, that's no big thing just to believe. Even the demons believe and tremble. Well, we've seen these demons here tonight. This demon, knowing he's a son of God, has no doubt that he's a son of God. He says he is a son of God. And so James said, yeah, they're a personality. Now then, Jesus used their habits to teach a lesson in Luke the 11th chapter. Luke was telling the people that they need to clean up their lives in there. And he says, if you don't replace good with the bad, when you do away with the bad and you don't replace it with good, something is going to happen. Now, today, we might use it in the realm of science. And if I were to tell you that if I had a jug of bad, putrefied air, I take it over someplace where they have a vacuum pump, and they pump all that air out and blow it out. All the air is out of that jug. So you pull the cork out of it, and what's going to happen to that jug? It's going to be replaced with some more air. Now, there for a minute, we got all the air out. But there is no such thing as vacuum that will stay unless it's forced. So once you pull it out, then that's it. Now, he said, the same way with demons. He said, the guy is like a man. He said he has a demon in him. So the demon is cast out. The demon leaves, and he goes away. The man doesn't do anything with his mind, just leaves it the way it is. And finally the demon goes out, and he finds 7 other demons. And he said, well, I know where there's a place to live. And so he comes back, and this guy's mind, his house, the demon's house, is all vacuumed and dusted. There's nobody living in there. It's kind of like a bunch of hippies coming. What would they do if they found a vacant house? You see. So move in. So all of them move back in, and it says the end of that guy is worse than the beginning of him. Now, the interesting thing is, that's the way demons operated. There could be several demons live in a person. Later on, we'll find legions of them. This guy was in really bad shape because there were thousands of them in him. Now, then we learn then in Mark 10 and so forth, that they are distinguished from diseases. When it says Jesus went out, it says he cast out demons and healed all manner of diseases. The things that demons did to you, it was not a disease. It was something that the demon itself actually caused. A lot of times they would cause epilepsy and so forth, and people would fall in fires. But Jesus distinguishes them. It's not a disease. They're a real thing. Jesus addressed them as persons, and they answered. We've already seen that, you see, tonight. Later on, he's going to do it. You remember when he goes over to that demoniac, and he says, come out of the man, and they said, well, can we go get in the swine? Remember? And Jesus said, well, go on. So they talked to him. Then they have desires in Mark 5. That's the one where they said, don't cast us out. In other words, we want a place to live. Can we go get in the swine? So they had desires. Then they had superhuman knowledge of Jesus, as we've already seen. Then the last verse, the last one down there, is an interesting thing. Now, as you look at the demons there in Zechariah chapter 13, 1 and 2, Zechariah prophesied demons would stop, that demons were going to cease. So now, if you ask me, I'll ask you the question before you ask it me, because everybody says, do we have demons today in the world? My answer is no. No, we don't have demons today. You say, well, Lowell, you're such an expert on demons. What are they? I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. Everything I know about demons, I've got up here for you to read. They are a spiritual being. They are a servant of Satan that we'll learn about later on in Luke the 10th chapter. They're his servants in the spiritual realm. They're condemned individuals. They're not here to be saved. And so they're Satan's army, his people that's here. And the Lord, Zechariah prophesied, when the Lord came, he's going to put a stop to it. Now, let's look at what we've got here. In case you didn't bring your Old Testament, you brought your New Testament tonight. In Zechariah 13, Zechariah says, in that day. Now, in that day, he's going on down through. In that day, in that day, in that day. And he's talking about in the day when the Messiah comes. And we'll see it here. In that day, there shall be a fountain open to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and for uncleanliness. So now, just in this one verse, let's look at this. That identifies what he's talking about. In that day. In what day? In the day when there is a fountain opened. And this fountain is open for sin and uncleanliness. So this is talking about the Messiah. When the Messiah comes and the fountain of his blood is open to cleanse you from your sins and your uncleanliness. This fountain is not to drink out of, to cleanse you of a thirst attack, but it's to cleanse you of your sin. So it identifies it. Nobody would argue with the point. I've never seen that it's talking about when the Messiah comes. Now notice some other things. When the Messiah comes, verse 2, and it shall come to pass in that day, when the Messiah comes, saith Jehovah of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land. Stop. What was the problem that the Jewish nation had from the days of Abraham all the way down through the captivity? Idolatry. They always had an idol hid somewhere. And he's saying here that that is something that's going to stop among the Jews when the Messiah comes. God is going to put an end to idolatry. Now, God put an end to idolatry when he took his children into Babylonian captivity, kept them there for 70 years, and just left them and said, okay, there's your gods. And I'll be back in 70 years to get you. Let your gods take care of you. And they learned in that period of time there's no such thing as a heathen god. So it's going to be cut off. So in New Testament times, the Jews never had any problem with idolatry. and they shall no more be remembered. In other words, among the Jews, or among physical Jews or spiritual Jews, the church today, idolatry is not a problem. And also, I will cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to pass out of the land. Now, first of all, let's take the prophet. I will cause the prophet to pass out of the land. Now, he said, in the day when the Messiah comes, Messiah's era here, God is going to have the prophets to pass out of the land. Now, all the way through your Bible, God had prophets that he would speak through. What is a prophet? What's the definition of a prophet? It's a mouthpiece of God, one who speaks in behalf of God. God tells him what to say, he uses his mouth, and he says it, whether it's Isaiah, Jeremiah, or whatever it is. So God would use a man to reveal his will. Now he said, when the Messiah comes, I'm going to cause the prophets to cease. They're not going to be speaking to us anymore. Now, why is that? Why is it? There are no prophets today. Why? We don't need them. The Bible's been completed. God completed his revelation. He used prophets. He used apostles in the first century. He gave us the Bible. He gave us that perfect law of liberty. We have it now, and so there are no prophets. So prophets are going to cease out of the land, and then he says, and the unclean spirit to pass out of the land. So now, I'm going to cause the unclean spirits to also pass out of the land. So here we have the promise in the Old Testament. Now, I'll give you a few New Testament scriptures to think about. In Luke the 10th chapter, verses 17 through 8 and 18, Jesus has sent his disciples out to preach to the people. And he said, now you go out, you heal the sick, cast out demons, and you preach to these people, these Jews. They came back, and they were just ecstatic. They came back and said, Lord, even the prophets are subject unto us. I mean, the demons are subject unto us. Why, we can even cast out demons. The Lord's remark is this. It's kind of interesting. He said, and the servants returned saying, with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject unto us in thy name. And he said unto them, I beheld Satan fallen as lightning from heaven. When you were out there casting out demons, what was it Jesus said he saw? I didn't see you casting out demons. Oh, yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. But what did he see? I saw Satan fall as lightning from heaven. In other words, the casting out of the demons was part of bringing Satan under total control. Bringing him under total control. As long as the demons are there, Satan would not be brought under total control. So, he said, that's what is happening. Now, here's what we know. There's very little we know about these things. A whole lot we'd like to know. A lot of details that we'd like to know. Remember, what is that verse that takes care of the things that you would like to know and the Bible doesn't say anything about it? Deuteronomy 29:29. Remember that. Read it quite often when you say, well, there's no answer to that. Okay. If there's no answer to that, if God hadn't revealed it, what did God say? The things that I have revealed belong to you. And the things I haven't revealed belongs to him. See? And so this is not anything we need to know. But here I do know this. I do know that in order for Satan to be conquered, these demons need to be cast out. So we see there's a similarity there. Now, after Jesus went back to heaven, here we find Paul writing, and he says in Ephesians 4:8, wherefore he saith, when he ascended on high, that is, when Jesus went back up on high, he led captivity captive. Now, how do you lead captivity captive? I know how I could lead Ryan captive, you see, conquer him. Since he's been traveling a lot here, I could say, I will lead the traveling man captive. And you'd understand what I'm talking about. Now, if I said, I'm going to lead captivity captive, what am I talking about? Well, let me put it another way. Maybe we can see it here. We have a heavyweight boxing champion of the world, don't we? Used to be only one. Now there's 14 of them. I don't know, and everybody's lost interest in it. But somebody is number one. He can stand up and he can say, I can whip any man in this world. I am the heavyweight champion of the world. What would I mean if I come along and I say, you have conquered everybody you've ever fought? You've knocked them out. But I'm going to conquer Mr. Conqueror. You've taken them captive, but I'm going to take captivity captive. That's what I understand this passage saying. When he ascended to heaven, when Jesus ascended to heaven, he had conquered Satan. He had conquered Satan. He had brought him under control. Now, when that actually happened, I don't have the verse down here, but that actually happened. It's over in Hebrews chapter 2, and there we read at the moment that Satan was brought to zero. Now, in Hebrews 2, and down in verse 14, since then the children are sharers in flesh and blood, he, Christ, also himself in like manner partook of the same. So he partook of flesh and blood, that through death he might bring to naught him that had the power over death, that is the devil. Now, when Jesus died, shed his blood, he brought to naught. What does naught mean? Zero. What does zero mean? Nothing. How much is nothing? In other words, Satan was brought to nothing. See? When Jesus Christ died and shed his blood. You see, there. Now, one might ask, doesn't Satan still have influence in this world? Doesn't Satan still conquer people? Cause them go to hell? The answer to that is yes. Yeah, he still does. How can it happen? Okay, let me tell you now. First of all, let me tell you something. Here's some things I know. A lot of things I don't know, but here's some things I know. So let me put it this way. When Jesus Christ died on the cross, he brought Satan to zero. No power. That's it. It's over. He shed his blood. Now then, every person that Satan has conquered can walk out of that prison of sin, be washed in the blood of Christ, and there's nothing Satan can do about it. It's just like if there was a prison up here, some prison, everybody in this room has been captured by the Taliban, and you're held in prison, and you're suffering. And I come up and I capture the Taliban, and I throw the gates open, and I say, come unto me, all ye that don't want to stay in prison. I'll give you rest. Isn't that kind of what Jesus did? Come. Now, what are we going to do about a guy like Lee that says, oh, I want to stay here? Well, he's back there. Where's he going to sleep tonight? On the ground? What's he going to eat? Junk? He's back there. But now, is Lee free or not? Yep. He's free. Taliban doesn't have any control over him. Now, if he wants to stay there, that's his prerogative. That's really the way it is with Christ. Christ came and he freed us. He died on the cross. He said, come unto me, all ye that labored are heavy laden. The invitation is open. And he closed his Bible. Whosoever will come unto me. So every person is free to throw off the shackles of sin. But you say, do they? No, a lot of them that don't. A lot of them that don't. Well, what kind of power does Satan have to keep you in? What is there? The only power Satan has today is the power of temptation to tempt you. Now, it may be if we check on Lee, he's sitting back there in that prison house, sleeping on the ground. It might be if we check on him and go in there that there's somebody over there that's tempting Lee. See? There's somebody over there that's tempting. Say, Lee, stay here with me, and I will give you a lot of gold, and I will give you this. And they're leading him and tempting him and promising him, and he's foolish enough to stay there. But it's only tempting power. The gate's open. Come on, Lee. Nope, I'm going to stay there. That power is stronger than this power, but it's temptation. Now, the reason I know that, again, is over in James. Let's take a peek over here in James chapter 1 and down in verse 13. James 1:13. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempteth no man. But each man is tempted when he is drawn away by his own lust and enticed. Now there's where your temptation is. It's when you are drawn away by your own lust and enticed. This lust and enticed are interesting words. I mean, drawn away and enticed are interesting words. The word drawn away in the Greek language is a hunter's term. It's what a hunter would use as he goes out to try to capture a deer. He goes out and he's out here and he's trying to get this animal. The animal obviously runs in the brush, and a man can't get him. Well, the only way that a hunter can get a deer is to tempt him, is to cause that deer to try to escape in some other way. So the guy might take a rock and throw in the bush, and got his gun up here and ready to shoot when the deer comes out. See? And so, but if that deer will just stay there, he doesn't have to come out. But it's a hunter's term. The word lust is a fisherman's term, and it means baited. So you go out here in the ocean, in that vast ocean, all those salmon out there. What are your chances of reaching down and grabbing a salmon? You're not going to get one. But yet people catch salmon all the time. Well, how do they do it? They go out there and bait a hook. What is bait? What kind of bait do you use? Do you use different bait if you're fishing for catfish or salmon? Yeah, vastly different bait. You learn what a salmon wants to eat. You learn what a catfish wants to eat. You learn what a trout wants. Then you put that bait on a hook, and that bait really looks good. It looks like a meal. It will satisfy their desires. Now, that bait can hang there. Those fish can just swim around it. As long as they don't bite it, you can't catch them. But when they bite the bait, that's what this is saying. Here it is, that there are temptations out there. Power, money, sex, all different kind of temptation. Now, we're drawn away by our own lust and desires. What is it I want? Do I want this thing bad enough? Will I be willing to lie? Will I be willing to do this or be willing to do that? He said, and the lust, when it hath conceived, beareth sin, and sin, when it is full grown, bringeth forth death. So that's how you get caught. Satan doesn't have the power to come into your life tomorrow and say, you're going to sin. The only power Satan has is just bait. He can use the movies, books, TV, other people around, dope, alcohol, money, power, sex, dangle it in front of you. And we all have it dangled in front of us. And we're all like a fish in the ocean. What's your weakness? What's your weakness? Is it a salmon egg? Or is it a plug out here of some kind? See? Or is it a fishing worm? What is your weakness? That's the only power that Satan has. And otherwise, he is brought to naught in there. Now, when Jesus went back, he led captivity captive. He has conquered Satan then in that respect then. Okay, one other verse that we might go to we're not going to be analyzing that, but Revelation 21 through 4. This is where a lot of people want to start their Bible study, isn't it? Over in Revelation. Well, what about this? What about that? I think this, what I've said tonight, might help just a little bit in looking at this. Now, Revelation is a figurative book, talking in figurative language. And here it is, he says, "And I beheld an angel coming down out of heaven, having the key of the great abyss, and a great chain in his hand. And he took hold of the dragon, the old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and cast him into the abyss, and shut it, and sealed it over him." Now, let me stop just a minute. Everybody gets caught on 1,000 years there, don't they? I mean, you say 1,000 years, his antennas go up. What does that 1,000 years? And so we get caught in that. Well, it's all figurative language. What it means is a long time, is what it means. But we missed the point. Leave out 1,000 years. What is this verse right here saying? "And I saw an angel coming down out of heaven, having the key of the abyss, the great chain in his hand. He laid hold on the dragon, the old serpent, the devil and Satan, and bound him and cast him into the abyss." What's happening to Satan? He's being bound. When did this binding take place? We read it back here a minute ago. See? When Jesus Christ died on the cross. He brought him to naught. You say, why is it like this? Well, the whole book is figurative language. See, the whole book is figurative language. And so what this is talking about is that Satan was brought under control, bound by Jesus Christ, by the shedding of his blood. He has no power left, and he's going to be bound for 1,000 years. For the whole period of time is what it means. You look up the word 1,000, the way it's used in the Bible, and it'll be, God says, "All the animals are mine on 1,000 hills." What does he mean? Now, there's a lot more than 1,000 hills. There's more than 1,000 hills just up here in the state of Washington, you see. Is God saying, all the animals in the state of Washington belong to me? Is that what he was saying? No. All the animals everywhere belongs to me. What happens when a kid comes up and says, "Dad, can I go somewhere?" You say, "No." "Why can't I?" "I have told you 1,000 times. What do you mean by that? Have you been checking it all? See? No. Adequate. That's it. Complete. No discussion. I'm not going to tell you why you can't do this or that. 1,000. And so it helps us understand such verses as that, to understand these things. But now, all this starts out with demons. The reason I spent so much time tonight is because we're going to be running across a lot of demons as we go here. And it takes a miraculous power to be able to take control of those demons and cast them out. And this is one of the things that Jesus did. Of course, it takes miraculous power to be able to cure the ill, put a leg back on a man, raise the dead. So it was one of those miracles that happened. Now, anybody got any questions that I can answer? I don't know to. I think I've told you everything I know about demons. So you put it all together and you can see that they were, yeah. No, not to my knowledge. Yeah. Okay. Now then, as we go ahead here in Luke 4:38 and Mark 1, he comes out of the synagogue after he had cast out those demons, and he went into the house of Peter, Simon Peter here, and Simon's mother was holding with a great fever. So she was down with the flu or something. She had a great fever. She was down there, and he stood over and rebuked the fever, and it left her, and immediately she rose up and ministered to them. She didn't just say, "Hey, you know, I think my fever's gone. It'll take 2 or 3 days to get my strength back." Okay? She just, strength there, and she was in there. Now, an interesting thing about this is Mark, where he saw it, and straightway, when they were come out of the synagogue, they came into the house of Simon. Straightway, immediately. Simon's house was right there by the synagogue. So Jesus just comes out of the synagogue, goes into Peter's house, and heals the mother. Now, there's two things I want to show you. First of all, the important thing. The important thing right now is that, remember, he hasn't chosen his disciples yet. So keep that in mind. And when he goes over with Peter and his mother-in-law has been sick and laying there with a fever, and he rebukes the fever and says, "Fever, come out of her," and it comes out, and she just jumps up and goes in and starts waiting on him. Will that impress Peter? Well, will he have a reason? I want you to start thinking. Will he have a reason that some of these days when Jesus is walking along and sees him in a boat and said, "Follow me"? Did he jump out of that boat? You see? So he's seeing some things. Here's an interesting thing, that over there, they have found what they're pretty sure is Peter's house. That whole roof they build over it to keep it out of the weather that is in there. I'll show you two or three kind of interesting things. All the white up there and all that is there. Now, this house has been identified as first century. They know it was built in the first century when Peter lived. When they excavated the house, they found an inscription in some plaster that said it was Peter's house. And then the location of the house, in Mark 1, it says, "And straightway, when they came out of the synagogue, they entered into the house." And I'll show you how close it is. Now, if you look at these things here, these are the rooms in there, and I wasn't, yeah, okay, there's not much right there to see, okay. Okay, there's another room. There's a fence built around it. You look down there, and the brick you see is a wall, and they have a circular room in the house, and it was a house that would be about from that post right there across, probably from there up here to this. The house is probably this big. It's pretty nice sized house. It wouldn't have been any bigger than that, but it'd be something like this. So there's a pretty nice sized house that they had there. There again is another picture of a half of it that is over there. Another picture that you can see there. Here, see a doorway that goes into the room. It's kind of interesting to be able to see things like that. This is looking down into one of the rooms, probably a bedroom of some kind, that you're looking down into. Now, here's the interesting thing. I was standing at Peter's house, right on the porch, when I took a picture of the synagogue. That's how close it is, see? And it says that he came out of the synagogue and straightway, immediately, entered into Peter's house. So it's about a half a block away is really what it is. There is where I'm at the synagogue, and I take a picture of Peter's house, looking back that way. And all that big structure is the structure that they built over it. But the interesting thing is that it says, "And he came out of the synagogue and immediately went into the house." So with all these things, they're pretty sure that they've got the house then that is there. Okay, now then, we go ahead here in Matthew 4:18 as we saw there, but now in Luke chapter 5, 1 through 11, now he's going to call some more disciples in here. "And it came to pass while the multitudes pressed upon him and heard the word of God, that he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret." Now, let's look at the lake of Gennesaret. It's the Sea of Galilee. That's what it is. The Sea of Galilee should never have been called a sea. It's not a sea. It's a lake. It's a lake about the size of Lake Washington. But you call them, over in that area, they call them seas, and over here we call them lakes. And so that's the reason that it is. But from our viewpoint, kind of leaves it there. Now, if you look at that valley that's down there, that's the valley of Gennesaret. It's just like the Monroe Valley or the Puyallup Valley. Standing up on a big mountain and took a picture down there. That's the valley of Gennesaret. It goes right up to the lake. So the lake is sometimes called the lake or the Sea of Gennesaret. Then you see Tiberias over here. Tiberias is a town right there at the seacoast. And one time, John refers to it as the Lake of Tiberias that's there. But then it's called the Sea of Galilee, or the Lake of Galilee, 99.99999 cents a time. That's what everybody calls it today, the Sea of Galilee. And the reason for that is because the whole country that it's in is the country of Galilee. See? So that's why you find the same lake that's named different ways then. So you look down on the lake, it's about 7 miles long, and at the widest part, it's 3 miles. Gives you an idea there of what we've got going in there. Now then, they're at the lake, so they get ready to go, and so here's what it says. And he entered into one of the boats which was Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the multitudes of the boat. And when they had left speaking, he said unto Simon, Put out into the deep and let down the nets for a draw. And Simon said, Master, we toiled all night and took nothing. That's when they would fish. It would be at night. But at thy word I will let down the nets. So now he healed my mother-in-law. I'll let down the nets. And when he had done this, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their nets were breaking. And they beckoned unto their partners of the other boats that they should come and help them. And they filled both boats so that they began to sink. But Simon Peter, when he saw it, fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. And he was amazed, and all that were with him, that the draught of fishes which he had taken. And so were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. And when they had brought the boats to land, they left all and followed him. So this was the miracle that really, really broke the camel's back. This is a picture of the way that you throw out the nets and let it go down and then pull them back up, and you get it in there. Okay, our time is up. That's without going into that. We'll have to stop right here. Here's where I want to leave it. I want us to see now, as we start out the next time, remember all of these things, these miracles that these men are seeing, so that when Jesus does actually call them, they're going to be ready to go. See? So it's not just that he comes along, calls, and a bunch of people then leave. Okay.